third step prayer. And Rob, if you'll help us.
I would love to. Hi, everybody. Rob K., recovered alcoholic. Great to see so many friends and acquaintances. And just thank you so much for being here, everybody. We're going to start with the third step prayer, which is on page 63 of your big book. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, and victory over them. May bear witness to those I would help. Thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. I do thy will always.
All right. Thank you very much, Rob. Okay, we're on page 51. And let's take a look at going back one paragraph. Is that here are thousands of men and women on page 50?
Sounds great. Page 50, everybody. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude towards that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seemingly futility of existence, they show an underlying reason why they were making heavy going a life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith.
Yep, absolutely. And we're talking a little bit about the human experience as we're going through these chapters here. If we back up just a little bit, where the power greater than have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, that would be step 2. And then a certain attitude towards that power would be a step 3. And then revolutionary change in the way of living and thinking would be their steps 4 through 12. Great way to kind of summarize everything in a couple of sentences there. This is really when you go, this happens soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seemingly futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. It's really doing the rest of the work, if you kind of look at it from that standpoint. There's quite a bit in this paragraph here. We've got the steps. We've got examples of the human experience as it kind of works its way through the sentences. And then I've highlighted the last part here. The presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. They present a powerful reason why one should have faith. So if I was to look at page 62, and if I started out near the top, whatever our protestations are, not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, and our self-pity, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some point in time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. Well, if we kind of come back to this, presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. The presence, they present a powerful reason why they should have faith. It's kind of taking the bad, which we just read, overcoming that, and getting belief, which is at the beginning of this paragraph, and then following it up with faith. It's a life-changing event. Life-changing. Rob?
Okay, let's continue. We're at the first paragraph of page 51, everybody. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of these contemporaries of Columbus thought a round world preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies.
Yeah, there was a lot of um, objections to these seemingly new ideas, and thank goodness we were able to make some progress here. This paragraph is really indicative of saying have an open mind. The idea behind this is to really open yourself up to the art of the possible, and not be fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Fixed ideas being probably the more modern idea that we have now, which is we are set in our ways and are resistant to anything new. So the idea here is to not be resistant, to have an open mind, and to take in some of these new concepts, which is belief and faith, working the steps and getting better through the process.
Yeah, I put a few things in the chat about Professor Langley's flying machine that went down, the Wright brothers, etc. Don't forget, this is in 1903 that the Wright brothers tried to fly. We talked about in the spiritual experience, contempt prior to investigation. The whole idea is to, leave your mind open. Don't discount something just because you believe this is true. Sometimes we do the set aside prayer before a meeting in order to open up our minds for new ideas to flow in. We're doing We Agnostics right now. Excuse me. We come up with prejudices from our youth and from other people, obviously, about what God is in our lives. And I've talked about this before, in the fact that, when I was a child, God was a punishing God. Don't do this, Rob, or God will not be happy. Don't do this, you're going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell, whatever. So my idea about God is a punishing God. Well, I have to lay aside my prejudice of what I believed as a child and try to open it up. What do I want God to be for me today? I want God to have my back. I want God to be all love, to care about me. So lay aside our prejudice, open up our mind to the possibility. Okay, remember, willingness is the most important thing that we come up with. Then we get belief, and then we get faith. Remember, belief is that something could happen. Faith is that it will happen. So keep your minds open. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost as an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing.
Yeah. So really just taking an idea, two people, the Wright brothers, really applying the concept of flight, actually putting to the test and kind of all of the past failings, and working towards, they made plenty of mistakes themselves before it actually happened. And once they did do it, there was a lot of disbelief that in no way could they have done what had been impossible prior to that. And I think it's interesting because as soon as flight came in, they're absolutely right. 30 years later, air travel was in full swing. I think we were going everywhere around the world. I, I think it's one of the ways that the world got smaller very quickly at that point. But the idea here is that there were a lot of closed-minded people, that this was impossible. No way could this happen. And it took quite a Herculean effort to get people to even take a look at it, let alone believe that it actually happened. So same concept they're trying to apply to your higher power and in the realm of the spirit, as far as that's concerned. So, Rob?
Yeah, the Wright brothers. If if it was today, there would still be people that don't believe that we would be able to fly, because we have such polar opposites nowadays. You got the conspiracy theorists, and we don't know what to believe anymore, and it becomes so difficult because you've got different news stations telling you this, another news station is telling you the complete opposite. What do you believe? That is the tough, so we're not better off today in that sense, so we have to have a faith in something, so as you all know how much, you know faith I have in God. Leave it up to him. He'll sort it out somehow. So, but in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the case with which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the gadget or theory which does not work for something new which does?
Yeah, and boy, was Bill a visionary at this point in time, thinking back in the mid to late 30s, and already talking about the concept of somehow getting to the moon. And it took another three decades, but there again, we conquered that as well. And again, a lot of people in disbelief, but there we are, working on what was perceived as an impossible task, and being able to overcome and achieve it. So again, really trying to get into the person that may be agnostic and or the true believer. I always tell that this is just as applicable to somebody that's got a lot of belief as well, that this is the idea of this spirit, this higher power, is something that you have to just open yourself up to and begin to let into your life, into your psyche, and in your body, and soon belief, and then faith will follow. Okay. Rob?
Beautiful, Leo. Well put. And as Leo said, 1939 is when the book was published. 1969 is when they landed on the moon. 30 years. That is not a long period of time. So, I find that just amazing that Bill would even think of something like that. We're going to get into the bedevilments right now, and I'm going to read them, and I'm going to change we to I, because it brings it closer to home. And I hope you feel, because now we're going to talk about human conditions. We had to ask ourselves why I shouldn't apply to my human problems the same readiness to change my point of view. I was having trouble with personal relationships. I couldn't control my emotional natures. I was a prey to misery and depression. I couldn't make a living. I had a feeling of uselessness. I was full of fear. I was unhappy. I couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we could see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was.
Yeah. We did have the bedevilments. We'll go over those real quick. That Rob has just put into the chat. We'll go ahead and just use that. So please reference that as we go along. But these bedevilments are things that are going to hold us back. we're going to be down on ourselves. We're going to question our capability and ability. We're going to, resist, kind of taking it and opening up our minds and our hearts. And a couple of things here, prey to misery, full of fear, unhappiness, the our emotional nature, and depression. There's just so many things here that people kind of experience on a regular basis. It's something that happens a lot, maybe more so now than even then, just depending on the situation. But point being is that we're a slave to these ideas, and trying to shed them and get past them is part of the work. And they torment us, and we need to be able to rise above, rise out of the ashes, and do better. Rob?
Yeah, life at step 2. Things are just not going my way, the way I want them to. I'm sure we can all say that at certain points we all felt this way, and thank God, this is the opposite of the problem, or of the promises, which is, we're going to get into the promises a little further along, but it's the way our life can totally change. How instead of we can become an asset instead of an ass, and how quickly life can change if we are willing to make changes in our life. So, when we saw others solve their problems by simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did.
It does, certainly, for a lot of people. So it's when you see this, you look over to your brother or your sister, and you see it working, and you've got to be at a minimum curious, and at a maximum here, very accepting and open-minded. Rob?
Yeah, our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Wow, that's powerful. I tried to play God for a long time. I didn't do a very good job. And when I realized that I wasn't in charge, life started to take on new meaning, new purpose. What can I do for you today? How can I be of service? Totally different way of thinking. Instead of what am I going to get out of it? What are you going to do for me today? We wake up in the morning, try to take ourselves out of the equation so we can be selfless, so we can do for others what we could not do for ourselves. It's an incredible life. I see all the smiles on these screens, and I know how you people feel. I get chills. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wright brothers would never fly.
Right. And this is, again, just reinforcing this lack of faith, this lack of belief, and this holding on to ideas that are resistant to growth and open-mindedness. And so the believing that we are going to be able to solve our problem under our own self-will and self-power. So this is just basically saying, here, look at these other folks. It's working for them. So something is real, and it's something that you need to try and accept, and really internalize.
Yeah, we're going to go from being an instinct based to God conscious based. Instinct based is I'm going to do what I normally do. It comes naturally to me. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause for a moment and say, what would God have me do in this situation? So I'm going to think instead of just reacting. It's a total different way of dealing with things. Okay. So instead of somebody saying something to me that ticks me off, I'm going to stop for a moment, pause. What would God have me do in this situation? Diffuse the situation, do something different. Okay. Great way to live. Logic, we're at the top of page 53, everybody. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it is more sane and logical to believe than to not believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we throw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know.
So this is that idea to take a concept that we're comfortable with. We want things that are logical. It's hard to grasp things that are illogical, and gives you the power to reason and examine the evidence of our senses and to draw conclusions. All good stuff. If you were to open your mind, start to accept the idea of this higher power, and start to internalize it, as I've said before, you can start to see where letting go and allowing this higher power to guide you and to prop you up is a good one. The agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. So here we are using some of the ideas in the past here of like the Wright brothers and flight, the ability to kind of internalize that so that you say, yep, that happened, even though we knew that it was going to be a tough thing to do. Even though most people believed it couldn't be done, we were able to achieve it. So we take that same underlying idea and apply it to the higher power, and we get to the point of that we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, and we get to our point, say to our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands and said we don't know. So idea is that you've got reasonable belief and faith are reasonable. Rob?
Yeah. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is either everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and read on to the next paragraph, and then we'll kind of tie those two together.
Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support.
Yeah. And, they're talking here reason as your higher power. It's the idea here that, either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? And when you first read that, it's either it's kind of black and white, but I think there are shades of gray in that continuum to get from a non-believer to somebody that can be open-minded, accepting, and try to apply some logic to it, and come to the point of beginning to believe. and confronted with the question of faith. First, there's belief, and then there's faith. You can't really avoid what we're trying to accomplish here. And so the point being is that one, you can honestly say, if you're looking at this logically, that there is something there, that there is this higher power that is working in other people. And so getting to that point, you can at least say, yep, I see that, I feel it, I can, you can almost reach out and touch it. But it's that last little bit, getting you to open up and allowing the higher power to enter into your life, into your psyche and your belief structure, so that you can have faith is what we're talking about here. And the idea is that we want to be able to be supported, and in that support, we can make that last little bit, that last stretch, and grasp it and hold on to it. Rob?
Yeah. What was our choice to be? Has anything else worked in our life? And that's what it comes down to, is that how has your life been going? Do we need something else in our life? Here's a must. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. That's a must. The outlines of the new promise, the outlines of the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eye and fresh courage to flagging spirits. That's a promise. How have we done with running our own lives? And we have to take a look at that. That was natural, but let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? Or did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful, to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time.
Okay, so this one kind of sneaks up on us. And the fact is, we've got you have faith. You've got faith in your abilities to reason, and absolutely, that is something to kind of go, wait a minute, I do already have faith. I'm just asking myself to create an extension of that reason and that faith in order to be able to accept a higher power. And that's kind of where we're going. We're kind of transitioning here. We've basically got, yep, there is something working in other people. Yep, we can see it. So we actually can get to the point of believing that. And then in that belief, we transition our own faith into what would be our higher power and our spiritual experience. Huh?
Yeah. Our own reasoning got us to where we are. Our own knowledge, our own self got us to where we are. And where did it get us? They talk about faith here. Just in the top paragraph, you have faith, faithful, 4 times. 4 times. We found too that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith, or love, or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else.
Yeah, this is really, where do you spend most of your time and energy? Thinking. That's where we are. And we're right here in the middle of it. trying to give ideas of the things that we worshiped. All right. Some of these were material items. Some of them were more, the idea of the immensity of the ocean, for example, and the beauty of a flower or something to that nature in that regard, and turning that worship into love. And what have we loved? And in this idea of something or somebody. So now we're taking the idea of the belief that there is something there because we see it in others, and from there we look at the stuff that we worship and love, and we're now basically taking these concepts and trying to just redirect them into what will become our higher power in that spiritual experience. Huh?
Yeah. A lot of people, Bill has been going through the book trying to get us to put aside our prejudice so that a new idea can pop in, that we can now have faith in something else other than ourselves. One of the people said to me one time is that, Rob, instead of thinking with your head, think with your heart, because that's where you'll find God. When we try to rationalize it, it's very difficult to rationalize, but think with our heart. It's a beautiful thought. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Yet, there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons, created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seem more intelligent than that. At least, so the chemist said.
Yeah, and here's another idea here. We're trying to just say, look, it's not just nothing. There is something there, and we can't deny that there is something there. And you can't, it's that, the division of a cell is in my mind a miracle. It's just watching it occur is just incredibly. I'm just amazed that something there does that, but yet it is there and it does do that. And so I have come to believe and have faith in life itself, and I have been able to reason it and through it, and been able to get to that point where I believe in the things that are going on. So again, making some transition here. We're just slowly building blocks onto a foundation of belief, and then ultimately the goal at the pinnacle of those building blocks is going to be faith in your higher power, and your open-mindedness in accepting of that, getting rid of your old ideas. Bob?
We're at the bottom of page 54, everybody. Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. What about people who prove that man could never fly? Yet we have been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true.
Right, and part of that is because we didn't know what they were talking about. We were closed-minded. We were holding on to old ideas. We were in the population that proved that man could never fly idea. It just isn't there. So now what we're doing is kind of using some reverse psychology here and saying that here's where we are. And this disbelief, this I'm going to prove you wrong, holding on to the old ideas, holding on to the concepts that were antiquated, and now kind of looking at it from a standpoint that that level of belief or whatever was insufficient, and quite honestly, it was ridiculous. Just kind of in that idea. Here we are saying that man can never fly. turns out that they were wrong, and we can fly. So this idea that you can have belief and turn that into faith is also a concept that you can do that. You can do that. And what we're trying to do is getting you to a point so that you will do that. So, Rob?
Now, if you don't have the next 3 lines highlighted, I suggest you do, because this is one of the most profound sentences in the book. One of many, I must admit, because they all pop up, but this is deep. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other, it is there. Where faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human life are facts as old as man himself.
Yeah. They're trying to bring you along, and here's what they're saying is an absolute. All right. We were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, something bigger than ourselves. Looking around and realizing that certain things happen that are far above the ability of a human to be able to accomplish. And with that, we've skewed our ideas. We've blocked ourselves off from it. But the bottom line is if you are to kind of dismantle those old beliefs, you will find that there is the concept of a higher power in you, with you, and for you. And that's what we're trying to say here. The power in a greater, faith in a power greater than ourselves, and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. Rob?
Yeah. Coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. How many times have you had a gut feeling, an intuition, common sense, or your subconscious telling you not to do something? Okay. I'm going to read that line one more time. Actually, we're fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. So many times newcomers come into the fellowship. Where do I find God? Where is God? I don't know where God is. Here it is telling you. Never in this book does it say, figure it out for yourself. Precisely. They give us instructions on how to do everything. They don't leave us hanging. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other, it is there. Powerful. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us.
Right. We saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. So, you can't really necessarily touch or see what we're talking about, yet here it is. You've got love for another person. So the concept here is having love for for that higher power, and really this is soul searching. When we talk about soul searching, this is kind of that deep down kind of self searching, kind of in a way that is something you can't grasp onto. But if you kind of go down deep, find that strength that you can tap into, you will find that there are a lot of things that you didn't think possible are now possible. And that's what they're trying to get across to us at this point. Rob?
Yeah. We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, and encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you.
Yeah. Sweep away prejudice. Okay. That's going to be one of the tough things that you're going to be trying to do. It's a Herculean task. Think honestly. You've said this before, that really you have to be completely honest with yourself. We're not talking about honesty to other people, although that's important. You have to be completely 100% honest with yourself and search diligently within yourself. Okay. That is what we call that soul searching, that kind of deep down introspective thought that gets you to a point where you can start to feel that there is something, this presence that you may not have been able to tap into before. And with this attitude, a positive attitude, you cannot fail. That is joining us on the broad highway. They've capitalized that. That's as a part of saying our spiritual awakening and our higher power. Rob?
Okay, we're at the bottom of page 55, everybody. In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought was an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration. Business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide, these calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One night when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known his spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I've known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God?
Yeah. And we're talking about Fitz Mayo. He's the number 3, or considered number 3 person in AA. His story is on page 208, page 208, and he got sober in November of 1935 there in New York. Although his story really takes us to the DC and Maryland area as far as where he lived and resided and got things started for AA. Rob, you probably have a little bit more about Fitz.
Yeah, he was the son of an Episcopal clergyman. Fitz was also a bookkeeper. In 1935, Fitz went to Towns Hospital. Lois described Fitz as an impractical, lovable dreamer. Fitz was the one that went to the Library of Congress to find out how many books were called The Way Out. There were 25, so they obviously called it Alcoholics Anonymous. Fitz, here's an interesting tidbit. I thought it was interesting anyway, is that Fitz's sister Agnes loaned AA $1,000 to get the book released from the publisher. So I thought that was interesting. Fitz is not much different than Dr. Bob. When we read Dr. Bob's Nightmare, which is in the story section, Dr. Bob's father was a Sunday school teacher. And Dr. Bob felt the same way, that, when he was a child, he had to go to church all the time, during the week, and on the weekends, and they decided that when they got old enough to decide that they were not going to darken the doors of the church again, and so, here's Fitz Mayo feeling the same way, too much of religion, not that, so who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide of flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his creator.
Yeah. And that is a great paragraph to describe somebody's immediate spiritual experience. Here he is. He's fraught with despair. He has had suicide. He's had business failures, insanity, fatal illnesses all around him. And he's looking at these people that he loves and he cares about that have been falling apart and dying, and wondering to himself, what is this? Why is this? There must not be a God doing anything good, because all of the things that I look at are all of the things that are bad. Yet he was able to rise above that and be able to open up his mind and his heart and realize that um, um, who is he to say that there is no God, when he's looking at other people that are finding that there is the presence of this higher power, and it just washes over him. Barriers are broken down, walls are crumbled. This whole idea that there is this higher power that can come in and all consume his presence is an important one to kind of grasp here and find. Just at the same time, some people don't have that thunderbolt kind of experience like he and Bill even describes as having. Some people come at it, over time, one increment or one building block at a time, and slowly getting there. And then finally, enough of the foundations built, enough of that structure is there, enough of the belief is starting to permeate your old ideas and turn that belief into faith. And there you are. You've got a higher power. You have this newfound kind of freedom and this confidence. And that's what's happening here with Fitzmayo. Rob?
We have a new employer. This is why the spiritual experience in the back of the book, 567, 568, was put in, is because when Bill talked in his story about the white light experience, the breeze that blew over the mountaintop, and then we hear Fitzmayo here jumping out of bed, who are you to say there is no God? These are white light experiences, or what they call a spiritual experience. Most of us will have a spiritual awakening. Slowly, over time, it builds up. I've told my story before where I didn't even realize I had a spiritual awakening until I was laid off of work. And I realized that, I just looked up when I walked out of the office and said, God, I know you got me. And that's when I realized that I had had a spiritual awakening, because I knew that instead of being panicked that, oh, nobody's ever going to hire me, this, that, and the other thing, because, who would ever employ somebody like me? I knew that God had my back. And it was at that moment that I realized that, what? I believe. Slowly. As we have said before, that an awful lot of people within your circle will notice a big change in you before you notice it yourself. Why? Because you're worried and thinking about other people. Where before it was always about you. Now it's about other people. How can I be of service to other people? How can I be an asset in other people's lives? Art always says, how can I bring value to other people's lives? Which I think is a beautiful thing. I'm not going to make big, huge changes in people's lives. I can't give you $1 million, which is going to change your life. But what I can do is give you a smile, a hug, or a how are you today? That's easy for me to do. Or buy you a coffee and sit down and have a chat and see how things are going in your life. Not big things, but you know what? To somebody that's struggling and not feeling very well, it's a huge thing. So if you get a chance today, reach out to somebody that you haven't talked to in a while, just to say hello. This was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. No later vicissitude had shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Save for few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned, and at such times a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity.
God had restored his sanity. So he had gone from this cornerstone fixed in it. Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. His ideas had been changed. He took that building block and he established it. And then no later vicissitude has shaken it. No longer later has difficulties, problems, and low points in his life have shaken what he has got in holding on to. His alcoholic problem was taken away. I can tell you that I remember when that idea happened, when it overwhelmed me, and I let go. I was relieved. I was calm, and there was this newfound confidence. And after that, I never drank again, save for a few brief moments of temptation. Obviously, it's always going to be there. We're not saying that this gets rid of everything. It just doesn't. We're still going to be afflicted with the human experience, and that's part of it. But you are now a lot more sane and more calm and more confident in what you're doing.
And
Rob?
remember, finding God isn't the final answer. Remember, we have 12 steps in this program. If finding God was the only one you had, we don't have 3 steps and we'd move on. But we have work to do. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his maker. Then he knew. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us.
And that's the end idea here is to open your mind, open your heart, allow this to come in, set aside your prejudices, and offer yourself to this higher power. Have this spiritual experience, whether it's suddenly or it's over time, and one step at a time. You should let it happen. And the idea here is he does come through this spiritual awakening to all who have honestly sought him, all that have honestly sought him. And remember, you need to believe before you have faith. Belief comes first, and then there's faith. And I'm reminded by this, in that in order for this to work, you have to find something that is more powerful than yourself. It's more powerful than yourself. Rob?
More powerful than a locomotive.
Yeah.
Able to leave. That's what it reminded me of. Sorry, guy.
Yep.
Remember on page 646, we read, God does not make too hard terms for those who seek him. And that's what it's all about. Leo, we have finished that chapter. It is 12:54. Do you want to bring in Mr. Bill?
Yes, sir. That sounds like a winner.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys. Good job today. This chapter has a real lot of deep stuff in it. It's basically what Bill Wilson's trying to do here with this chapter. He's trying to get the point across to us. We have to get rid of our old ideas or our fixed ideas. He used references to Columbus, to Galileo, the Wright brothers. All of these people, they got rid of their old ideas and they had new ideas, and they were able to make progress because they got new ideas. And that's the point he's trying to get across to us. We need to come up with some new ideas when it comes to the realm of the spiritual. And he told us on page 52 about the bedevilments. You could call that a dry drunk or untreated alcoholism. These are things that happen to us when we're sober. And in order to get rid of them, we need to have a reliance on God. We can't just rely on ourselves, because we can't make that stuff go away any more than we can make alcoholism go away. And basically, the point he's trying to get across here is Bill's not trying to tell you who God is or whether or not there is a God. He's just trying to get the point across that we need a God in our life. We need a power greater than ourselves because we don't have enough power to defeat alcoholism. That's why we're powerless over alcohol. We need a power greater than ourselves. And that's the point he's trying to get across to us here. And he talks about this guy, Fitz Mayo. And Fitz was the number 3 guy in New York. And basically, he had a really lot of stuff to do in the beginning of helping AA get started and all of that. And it describes his spiritual experience here. He tumbled out of bed, and this is basically a description of a spiritual experience. That's what happened to him. And when he was in the town's hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Most people believe that was Bill Wilson, because Bill Wilson used to go back to the town's hospital and look for people. That's where he found Hank Parkhurst, and he found Fitz Mayo. All 3 of those guys, Bill, Hank, and Fitz, they all came out of the town's hospital. So there was something going on there. So there's some kind of power in that town's hospital that was taking place that was helping these people to get sober. And basically, again, all Bill's trying to do, he's trying to convince us that we just need to have a power greater than ourselves in our lives, and we need to get rid of our old ideas, our fixed ideas. Like Rob talked about, we had the ideas when we were little kids growing up that God was a punishing God and God was going to get you and do all this kind of stuff to us. We have to get rid of all of those ideas. And he also told us where we can find God. And Rob read that sentence a couple of times. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. In other words, we need to look inside of ourselves to find what we're looking for. Instead of walking all around the place and looking all outside, we need to look deep down inside ourselves. That's where we're going to find something. And he talks about faith in here. We're born with faith. We have faith already. We just don't know it. We're living on faith. And little kids are born with faith. A little baby has faith that its mother will feed them. That's why they cry for their mother, because they want their food, and they automatically have faith that their mother will take care of them and feed them. We have faith without even knowing it. We're born with faith. And all he's saying is now we need to use this faith with a power greater than ourselves so that we can get through alcoholism. That's basically what this whole concept is that Bill's come up with. All right, thanks a lot for letting me share. That's all I got.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. All right, let's go ahead and close out with the Serenity Prayer, Rob. Thank you, sir.
Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
All right.